Chapter 101. Xiao Xingyu looked at Su Zime and yelled, "Su Zime, calm down." "I'm very calm," Su Zime replied with a smile. "The Misty Sect is an affiliate of our true martial holy sect. If you kill their saint heir, it will damage the relationship between the two sects," Xiao Xingyu hastily said. "What's the use of maintaining a relationship with a second-rate sect?" Su Zime laughed and said, "You really have none of the grandeur that a disciple from a great sect should have." Zhang He, on the side, had already been scared pale and now only thought of escaping, but Su Zime's gaze stayed on him, restraining him from making any rash moves. "Don't think about running away. If you think you can escape under my level 6 formation, then by all means try," Su Zime said, looking at him. "Young Master Su, that's not what I mean. I absolutely had no intention of provoking you." Zhang He quickly shook his head and said, "Oh? Then what do you mean?" Su Zime walked toward Zhang He as he spoke. Zhang He instinctively took 2 steps back, then forcibly swallowed his saliva and said with an ingratiating smile, "Young Master Su, I merely heard some unsubstantiated rumors that I feared might tarnish your noble image, so I wanted to explain on your behalf, hoping you wouldn't mind. If I said anything wrong, I apologize to you." Su Zime walked up to Zhang He, looked at the cold sweat rolling down his forehead, patted his shoulder with a smile, and said, "Fool, how could I mind?" "That's good," Zhang He responded with an ingratiating nod as he looked at Su Zime's smile. However, the next moment, the curved blade unsheathed and Zhang He's head parted from his body instantly, even until his death. His face was fixed in an ingratiating smile. "I called you a fool, yet you believed me when I said I didn't mind." Su Zime sighed. You actually killed him," said Xiao Xingyu, looking at Su Zime, his voice filled with panic. Su Zime chuckled, picked up Zhang He's head and took steps toward Xiao Xingyu. "What do you want to do?" Zhang Xin drew his sword and stood in front of Su Zime, asking, "Junior brother Zhang, if you want to fight, I'll spar with you." Meng Kuo also slapped the table beside him, immediately shattering it, his aura as imposing as a rainbow. "We're all disciples of the same sect. There is no need to fight to the death," Zhang Xin said with a frown. "Don't worry, I won't kill him," Su Zime replied with a smile. "I don't believe you. You just said you wouldn't kill Zhang He." Xiao Xingyu immediately stepped back a few paces and shouted, "The cream of the youthful generation of true martial holy sect, an emperor-level talent, the grandson of the great elder. Look at yourself now. Do you deserve it?" Su Zime said with a light chuckle, shaking his head. "Don't worry, the one who leads the team to Purple Sun City this time is your grandfather. If I killed you, I wouldn't gain any advantage either." Hearing Su Zime's words, Zhang Xin thought for a moment before finally stepping aside. Watching Su Zime approach him, Xiao Xingyu mustered his courage and asked, "What do you want to do?" "The recent incident has nothing to do with me." Su Zime placed Zhang He's head on the table, then grabbed Xiao Xingyu by the hair and forced his head down to a level parallel with the tabletop. At that moment, Xiao Xingyu saw Zhang He's face right in front of him, still wearing a sycophantic leer. "Remember this smile. Remember this face, because next time it might be you on this table," Su Zime said indifferently. After that, Su Zime let go of Xiao Xingyu. Looking at Xiao Xingyi's disheveled appearance, Zhang Xin frowned but didn't say anything further. He thought Xiao Xingyu was too cowardly. Even if Su Zime was an idiot, he wouldn't dare to brazenly kill him just like that. One must realize that the main person in charge who came to Purple Sun City this time was the Great Elder. And if the Great Elder went berserk, Su Zime would not have a good outcome either. He was a powerful practitioner of the esteemed Vein Realm, not Xiao Xingyi's bodyguard, and if it weren't for respecting his master's wishes, he wouldn't even want to bother with Xiao Xingyu. Such Emperor Pulse Realm talent was thus wasted. After finishing his meal, Su Zime rented a room and returned to it. He reflected on the scenes from the painting palace in his past life. Although much time had passed, some memories were still vivid. If he remembered correctly, in his past life, the World Pearl should have been obtained by Chu Yang. As for this time, he didn't know whether Chu Yang would dare to come, since the entire extreme west region was now hunting for him. Moreover, with 3 great elders of the esteemed Vein Realm from the Imperial Rule Immortal sect stationed here, if Chu Yang dared show up, he would certainly be directly apprehended by the Great Elder. Outside Purple Sun City at that moment, a sallow-faced young man stood at the city gate, looking up at the ancient, towering city walls. "Ink Elder, we have finally arrived." The young man exhaled deeply. This young man was none other than Chu Yang. Ever since he learned the face-changing technique from Ink Elder, he had adopted a new face, as long As he avoided places where powerful practitioners often appeared, he didn't need to worry about being exposed. After all, there were not so many practitioners of the Emperor Pulse realm in the world. Yang, there are many masters in Purple Sun City. So be as careful as you can, Reincarnation Elder advised, rushing here upon hearing the news about the emergence of the Painting Palace. Reincarnation Elder believed that Chu Yang was a person with a profound destiny and that this legacy should rightfully include a part for him. Chu Yang entered the city, and indeed, Purple Sun City, being the capital of an empire, had a bustle unmatched by other cities. He moved cautiously, encountering many of his peers along the way, all of whom had a much higher cultivation level than him. His cultivation had just made a breakthrough to the true Vein realm during these days, but Chu Yang did not allow himself a shred of pride in his heart. He knew that, whether in terms of resources or talent, he was much weaker than many of his peers. The accomplishments he had today were all hard-won, bit by bit, yet this still wasn't enough to bridge the gap between him and the offspring of the great powers. After making a round in the city, Chu Yang had also gathered some intelligence regarding the Painting Palace. In order to avoid being discovered, Chu Yang didn't dare to linger outside for too long, and after searching several inns, he finally rented a room. Back in his room, Chu Yang began to cultivate. Inside his body, a pale golden bead slowly rotated. This was the Yin Pearl of the Forgotten Dust Pearl. At that time, when Chu Yang saw the autobiography of the forgetful Taoist in the cave, the character for Forget on the book turned into a beam of golden light and rushed into his body. At that moment, Chu Yang thought it was just a vain skill's inheritance that taught him eternal resentment. But over time, with each cultivation session, this golden light gradually coalesced, and now it had become a bead. Chu Yang was now very worried. He feared he would end up like the forgetful Taoist's life, forgotten by the world. Chapter 102. He was afraid that Bailey Xiao would forget him, and eventually even Ink Elder would forget him. Although he didn't have many relatives, each of them was crucially important to him. Teacher, do you think there will ever come a day when you also won't remember me? Chu Yang stood by the window, looking out at the gradually darkening sky. He asked. No, since the forgetful Taoist was able to leave behind the Yin Pearl, it means he had a way to extract the Yin Pearl from his own body. Ink Elder consoled, there must be a way, we just haven't found it yet, don't worry. Chu Yang nodded, but the worry on his face became even more evident. The next day, early in the morning, Chu Yang got out of bed, finished washing up, and walked toward the Painting Palace, hoping he could blend in with the crowd and enter. At this time, the western district of Purple Sun City was almost completely occupied and congested with a dense throng of people. As Chu Yang arrived underneath the Painting Palace, looking up at that somewhat surreal building, his expression turned awkward. Because at the entrance of the Painting Palace, 3 Saint Vein Realm Elders stood guard on both sides. As the main force moved towards the inside of the Painting Palace, no one could escape their eyes. Teacher, what should we do? Chu Yang asked anxiously. It's impossible to enter the Painting Palace now. Losing some opportunities is a minor issue. But if they discover you, with 3 Saint Vein Realm experts there, you won't stand a chance of escape? Ink Elder replied helplessly. So we're just going to leave like this? Chu Yang asked reluctantly. Forget it. Opportunities can be forsaken, but life is critical. Ink Elder responded. Chu Yang nodded in resignation and, taking advantage of the fact that everyone was surging toward the Painting Palace, he quietly withdrew, with all the disciples of Purple Sun City entering the Painting Palace. The initially bustling city instantly grew much quieter. Walking down the somewhat deserted street, Chu Yang felt that everything was going against him. The threat of the forgotten dust pearl inside his body was still unresolved, and his painstaking effort to get to the Painting Palace had been in vain. Young master, would you care to take a look at my collection? Just as Chu Yang was about to leave Purple Sun City, a vendor by the roadside suddenly pulled on his sleeve. The vendor said with a smile, my items can ward off evil and bring luck. They bring blessings and can change one's fortune. I see you sighing and looking troubled. You must have encountered some misfortune, right? How about buying one to change your luck? Sorry, I don't need it. Chu Yang shook his head and glanced at the small stall next to him. The stall was filled with all kinds of odd items, including statues with deer heads and human bodies, monsters with 8 claws, and many others that Chu Yang had never seen before. He casually looked over them and realized they were all ordinary ceramics, clearly intended to deceive people. Just as he was about to look away, a book on the stall caught Chu Yang's attention. To Chu Yang's senses, it was just an ordinary book, yet for some reason, when his gaze swept over the book, he felt an inexplicable sense of affinity, and even the forgotten dust pearl within him began to tremble. Young master, these are collections I've amassed over decades. Perhaps there are some good items among them. The vendor hurriedly continued, seeing Chu Yang's interest. Previously, someone bought a sealed jar from me, and when they opened it, it was filled with dust bloodstones. If you don't believe me, you can ask around. There's risk, but also the chance of a windfall. Chun Lao-san, are you tricking these newcomers again? A man nearby saw this and teased with a laugh. Old Wu, cut it out with your slander. Chun Lao-san's expression changed, and he quickly retorted, wasn't it real? The time someone found dust bloodstones at my stall? It was real, but you, Chun Lao-san, have been in business for decades and you've only been looted once. Aren't the odds a bit too low? The man said, chuckling. They just don't have the luck. This young brother here is different from ordinary people. He's certain to find something. Chun Lao-san replied with a huff. Chu Yang squatted in front of the vendor's stall and casually picked up a few strangely shaped ceramic pieces to look over. Although his target was that book, he knew he couldn't be too obvious. To prevent the vendor from raising the price on the spot. How much for this? Chu Yang asked, pointing to the monster with the head of a deer and the body of a human in his hands. Young brother, you really have a keen eye. Chun Lao-san smiled and replied hastily. This statue has some legends associated with it. It is said that deep within the 100,000 mountains live some half-beast people whose tribes take the appearance of their ancestors as their totem. This statue was obtained from the 100,000 mountains. It might be related to the heritage of the half-beast race. A fixed price, 10,000 spirit crystals. Do you think I'm a fool? Chu Yang asked with a light smile. Chun Lao-san chuckled awkwardly, then said, of course, this price might be a bit inflated. After all, it's not confirmed. I'll give you a sincere price, 1,000 spirit crystals, but if you haggle again, that would be unreasonable. I'll offer you 200 spirit crystals for 2 items from here. How's that? Chu Yang said with a smile. He could tell that the ceramics were forged by the vendor himself and weren't worth much at all. Add a bit more. It's not easy for us either. We are all small businesses, Chun Lao-san said with a smile. All right, I'll give you 250 spirit crystals. If that's not okay, then I won't take it, Chu Yang said as he took out spirit crystals from his storage ring and handed them to Chun Lao-san. He first took the statue with the deer head and human body, which he had intended to pick up along with another octopus-like monster statue. However, after pondering for a while, Chu Yang shook his head and said softly, your statue looks quite new, seemingly fresh out of the kiln. I'd rather pick something else that's safer. Chun Lao-san laughed awkwardly on the side. Some of the items on his stall were purchased at low prices, and some were indeed fired by him. In fact, the cost was no more than 10 spirit crystals. After thinking it over, Chu Yang still took away the yellowed book next to him. Watching Chu Yang's departing figure, Chun Lao-san hummed a tune cheerfully. After returning to the inn, Chu Yang tossed the statue aside and quickly took out the yellowed book. When he held the book in his palms, the forgotten dust pearl inside of him shook even more fiercely. Chu Yang flipped through the book and discovered it was just an ordinary vernacular novel, with a story that lacked substance. After reading it several times without any clue, Chu Yang suddenly felt as if there was something inside the cover's compartment of the book. The compartment in the cover was a bit thick. He used his sword to cut through the compartment and found a piece of paper hidden inside. Chu Yang was certain the object making the forgotten dust pearl inside of him tremble was this piece of paper. When he took the paper in his hands, the forgotten dust pearl inside of him suddenly emitted a warm flow. The warm flow, beyond his control, flew out of his body and merged with that piece of paper in an instant. The paper emitted 10,000 rays of light that merged into the warm flow and then flew back into Chu Yang's body. Chapter 103. As the golden light merged into his body, Chu Yong felt a sense of clarity in his mind within his consciousness. The piece of paper transformed into a sky full of golden light, then outlined a map. All information regarding this map flowed into his memory. After a long time, Chu Yong slowly opened his eyes. A sharp light flashed in his pupils, and he murmured to himself, "The Yong Pearl of the Forgotten Dust Pearl." "Yong, what have you obtained?" Reincarnation Elder curiously asked. "A map related to the Yong Pearl of the Forgotten Dust Pearl," Chu Yong replied excitedly. This map was left behind by the Forgotten Dust Emperor after he embraced his destiny. He sought the other Yin Pearl, but searched for a long time without a shred of news. Once he became a great emperor. The Yong Pearl was of little use to him before ascending. He placed the Yong Pearl somewhere. He hoped that one day, the person fated to find the Yin Pearl could complete the Yin and Yang of the Forgotten Dust Pearls. And this map is precisely the guide to the hidden location of the Yong Pearl. All this was recorded on the piece of paper? Reincarnation Elder asked. "Yes, teacher. As long as we obtain the Yong Pearl, we can eliminate the threat of the Yin Pearl," Chu Yong replied with a smile. "Not only that, but you could also master the great Yin-Yang path and rise to great heights," Reincarnation Elder said with a smile. "The Forgotten Dust Pearl is ranked 4th on the list of world's strange treasures, after all. There's no time to lose, teacher. I will set off to find the Yong Pearl now," Chu Yong said with a smile. Right in front of the painting palace, the entrance to the inside was actually a painting within the painting. A gentle breeze blew, several willow trees swayed with the wind, and a boundless river stretched beyond the horizon, its glittering surface dotted with drifting fishing boats. Not far from the fishing boats on the riverbank was a small thatched cottage nestled among the green waters and blue mountains. 2 big red lanterns hung in front of the house, and the door was half concealed. It was such an incredibly lifelike painting that when Su Zime placed his hand on the wooden door, the lanterns within the painting flickered, and in a moment of darkness, he lost consciousness. All those who entered the painting palace had used the same method. When Su Zime woke up, he found himself in a vast plain wilderness. Surveying his surroundings, Su Zime already had a plan in mind. The challenges of the painting palace were divided into 4 layers, and if one failed even once, they would be directly expelled from the palace. Su Zime hadn't walked far when he saw a dense maple forest ahead. "Please find the only real maple leaf in these maple woods within a quarter of an hour." Suddenly, a tremendous voice came from the sky, exploding beside the ear like thunder. Su Zime slightly lifted his head. There had to be hundreds of maple trees in the forest, and each tree bore close to 1,000 leaves among the tens of thousands of maple leaves. Only one was real, and the difficulty of finding it was imaginable. Su Zime took a deep breath, understanding the meaning of this challenge. When a painter reached the highest realm, they could make the items in their paintings a reality just like Hua Wuqing, but no matter how exquisite their painting skills, the items they created differed fundamentally from real items. Creation is the work of heaven and earth, the various fates and causalities entwined. The cultivation of lifespan and the human body's complex structure are unimaginable. A painter could not achieve the feat of creation. At best, they could only imitate nature and create false items in this vast maple forest. Besides the leaves that naturally grew between heaven and earth, everything else was painted. Hua Wuqing set up this challenge with the goal of making every painter who accepted his inheritance able to distinguish between reality and a painting, and not to get lost in the illusion of paintings coming to life. Su Zime slowly closed his eyes. The world pearl was of utmost importance to him, and he didn't wish to waste any more time. Sometimes your eyes can deceive you. To find the real maple leaf, you must rely on your inner eye. He let go of his thoughts, discarding all distractions, allowing himself to enter a state of emptiness. Su Zime slowly circulated the cultivation of the soul. Great freedom Ju. At first, his mind was quite restless, but as time passed by little, Su Zime felt a silence around him as if the whole world had come to a standstill. He was alone in an endless loneliness with darkness before his eyes. Suddenly, he heard different sounds. There seemed to be a breeze blowing around him, the wind rustling the maple leaves. Su Zime walked through the maple forest with his eyes shut. The sound of countless leaves swaying grew clearer and clearer. As he listened carefully to the sound of the leaves fluttering, he continued walking forward. After a long time, He suddenly stopped beside a maple tree. He slowly reached out with his left hand and, after fumbling through the dense maple leaves for a while, finally picked one. Only then did Suzume open his eyes and, looking at the maple leaf in his hand, the corners of his mouth curled into a smile. When he took this maple leaf, he found that the entire maple forest he was in began to shake. The maple trees that were very realistic moments ago turned into a painting. Slowly falling in front of Suzume, the maple forest vanished, and Suzume found himself back on the plains once again. He placed the painting of the maple tree into his storage ring, then continued onward. The further he went, the higher the temperature became. The weather, which had been like a gentle spring breeze, became scorching hot. Suzume didn't walk for long before he felt parched, the blazing suns scorching the earth as if trying to pour all their light and heat down. He looked up at the sky and saw, to his surprise, that there were two suns hanging peacefully. Under the baking of the two suns, the earth below was cracking with dry fissures. Suzume kept walking forward, and a small village appeared ahead. Finally here. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and let out a long sigh. At the entrance of the village, a few children wearing hats were shooting arrows at the sun with their bows, but their arrows would fall down after reaching merely a dozen meters. The thought of bringing down a sun with these arrows was pure fantasy. However, Suzume knew that this challenge tested one's imagination. As a painter, an imagination was indispensable. "Hey kids, what are you doing?" Suzume approached with a smile and asked. "We're shooting at the sun. It's too hot, so we thought if we could shoot down a sun, it might cool off a bit." One of the kids responded in a babyish voice, "Little friend, with this method, you could never hit the sun in a lifetime." Suzume said with a shake of his head and a smile, "Do you have a way, big brother?" the child asked curiously. Chapter 104. "Go to your village and fetch me a basin of water, and I'll teach you," said Suzume with a smile. The child looked at Suzume with a puzzled glance, then scampered off into the village. Watching the child's retreating figure, Suzume smiled and shook his head. Though he had seen it once in his previous life, he still couldn't help being amazed at the intelligence of these children in the paintings. When he saw them again, before long, the child returned, panting with a small basin of water. Suzume placed the basin under the sun and, lining up the angle, a reflection of the sun appeared in the water. "Shoot your arrows at this reflection and you can hit the sun." Suzume pointed to the basin and said. This bow drawing and sun-shooting test was somewhat like a monkey trying to fish the moon out of the sea, but the difference was that while the monkey never caught the moon, you can actually hit the sun. A few children looked at Suzume skeptically, then bent their bows, knocked their arrows, and fiercely shot at the reflection of the sun in the water. When the arrows plunged into the reflection, the image in the water wasn't disturbed and rippled slightly. Instead, a dull thundering sound rumbled in the sky, and the sun that hung high became like a ball of fire that seemed to fall from the sky. "The sun has fallen. We hit it," the children cheered, jumping up and down. Suzume stood by with a smile. As the sun fell from the sky, the space around Suzume began to distort and shake again. As the space in front of him changed, when he opened his eyes, he found himself back on the plain. Another painting appeared before him, this one depicting several children bending their bows to shoot at the sun. Suzume put away the painting and continued northward. Initially, after shooting down the sun, the temperature around returned to normal, but as Suzume moved forward, he felt the air growing colder and colder. The sun was obscured by dark clouds, and snowflakes began to drift from the sky. The snowflakes fell heavier and heavier, the snow beneath his feet thickened, and even the temperature around became cold. Suzume, now at the pinnacle of the true vein realm, could still feel the cold. It wasn't just physical coldness, it was a deep, bone-chilling cold. He sat cross-legged, allowing the snowflakes to scatter on him. In a short while, his entire body was completely buried by the falling snow, turning into a snowman. Suzume only felt his entire body grow numb and without any sensation. Even all the organs in his body seemed to be frozen, and his heartbeat appeared to slow down more and more. "Am I going to die?" Suzume wanted to smile, but found that his muscles had already been frozen stiff. He closed his eyes, his consciousness growing more and more blurred, as if a voice was constantly advising him in the darkness, "Sleep now. After you fall asleep, it will all be over." Although his body was already in shock and his consciousness was veering towards sleep, the stubbornness in Suzume's heart still refused to end it like this. This competition against time and the struggle with the Grim Reaper was the most excruciating. Suzume didn't know how long it had been. He just felt that his body was completely icebound. He seemed numb to the cold, and he couldn't even hear his own heartbeat. Suddenly, a warm pulse began to throb in his chest, attaining enlightenment in the face of death, and then sparking the fire of a burning prairie within the endless icy expanse. Just like the saying goes, a single spark can start a prairie fire. Suzume only felt that the warmth was very faint, yet the coldness in his body was dispelled instantly. The snowflakes in the sky seemed to have stopped falling. And Suzume slowly opened his eyes to find that the icy and snowy landscape that was previously before him had vanished. He found himself once again on the plain, with the painting falling down in front of him. Snow and ice swept across the world, freezing everything. But under the cover of ice and snow there sat a person like a pine, sitting cross-legged on the ground, immovable, as if even if the snow buried the whole world, he would not be extinguished. This was the scene depicted in the painting, and Suzume took the painting and continued forward. The actual test of the third barrier was temperament. No matter how great the difficulty, even on the brink of death, one must not give up any hope. Suzume kept moving forward, and after a while, his gaze was captured by the scene ahead. The distant mountains seemed close at hand, yet were shrouded in haze, and the white clouds in the sky hung so low they appeared to be just above his head, as if one could reach out and grasp the clouds. The blue sky, clearly day, was twinkling with stars. Directly in front was a boundless sea with huge waves rolling in the middle, the roaring seawater being swept up by the waves but never seeming to fall. In the middle of the two sides of the waves, a path paved with pebbles led through a secluded lane. The pebbles floated on the blue water, reflecting the starry sky and the clouds overhead, as well as the misty mountains behind that were just a stone's throw away. In the middle of the pebble path, there was an inkstone on a table, and at this moment, a middle-aged man in a green robe stood before the table, engrossed in painting. Suzume stepped on the pebbles, one by one, then approached the middle-aged man. He watched the man paint, but there was no paper on the table. The man held a wolf hairbrush as though he were painting in the air. After a while, the middle-aged man put down the brush, and the spiritual energy around suddenly fluctuated. A fish leapt out from the space before him, darting into the sea, followed by a series of goldfish jumping out from space. "Do you see anything?" the middle-aged man asked with a smile. "I don't understand." Suzume shook his head. "You are quite honest." The middle-aged man laughed. "You are the first successor to come here, according to the rules. As long as you can paint a picture with a mood, you can get my divine brush." "I can't paint," Suzume shook his head and said, "and am not here to receive your legacy of the divine brush." Hearing Suzume's words, the middle-aged man was taken aback, then laughed. "Then you must be here for the World Pearl." "I'm sorry, the World Pearl is not part of the legacy of this painting palace. I have a painting." Suzume also smiled and took out the 3 paintings he had obtained earlier. "These paintings can only accept the inheritance of the divine brush. I will not give the World Pearl to others," the middle-aged man said. "You should take a look at this painting first." Suzume smiled. Then he took out the 4th painting from his storage ring, the very one he had gotten from Nie Xingxing before. It was a self-portrait of the ancestor of wind. "How did this painting end up in your hands?" The middle-aged man's expression changed slightly as he asked, "Are you her descendant?" "That's not important. When you painted this picture, you promised the ancestor of wind that as long as someone came to you with this painting, you would fulfill any request they had." Suzume smiled. "Isn't that right, Senior Wu Qing?" Chapter 105. The middle-aged man before me was none other than Hua Wuqing, once famous throughout the eastern continent. As for the life and death of Hua Wuqing, Suzume wasn't very clear, but he knew that the middle-aged man before him was just a residual image of Hua Wuqing. Speaking of Hua Wuqing, he was actually a man of deep passion. Many people find it difficult to extricate themselves from the bonds of love in their lifetimes. Hua Wuqing once loved Ancestor of Wind for a while, but Suzume wasn't really sure about the specifics. All he knew was that Ancestor of Wind and Dustless Emperor had been childhood sweethearts, and they later became husband and wife. At that time, Dustless Emperor hadn't yet been chosen by destiny, and someone wanted to use Ancestor of Wind's life to threaten the Dustless Emperor. In one pursuit, Ancestor of Wind preferred to leap off a cliff and die rather than burden the Dustless Emperor, but few knew that Ancestor of Wind didn't die after jumping off the cliff. Instead, she was saved by Hua Wuqing because of Ancestor of Wind's Severe injuries, Hua Wuqing took care of her for a long time, yet during that time, the two of them developed feelings for each other, growing fond of one another as the days passed. However, Ancestor of Wind couldn't let go of Dustless Emperor and chose him over Hua Wuqing in the end. In her own words, her heart ached when Hua Wuqing left, but when Dustless Emperor left, Ancestor of Wind felt as if her entire heart had died. That's probably the difference between liking and love. Ancestor of Wind couldn't be ambiguous with them both. She chose to leave Hua Wuqing, and it is said that on the eve of their parting, Hua Wuqing painted a portrait for Ancestor of Wind, and he promised that if someone came to him with the painting, he would do his utmost to fulfill one condition for that person. But Ancestor of Wind never intended to seek Hua Wuqing's help. She accepted the painting, but merely as a keepsake. Even later, when she left the painting within her legacy, she didn't tell people of the Immortal Spirit sect about the origins and use of the painting, for in her heart, the painting was just a beautiful memory of a chapter in her life. She also didn't wish for future generations to dredge up the past and seek Hua Wuqing's help with the painting. In later generations, there were many such claims that Hua Wuqing voluntarily gave up his destiny because of Ancestor of Wind during the struggle with the Dustless Emperor. Of course, the truthfulness of these rumors has yet to be confirmed. Hua Wuqing took the painting from Su Zimei's hands, cracked a grin, and chuckled softly as if scenes of the past were flashing through his mind. Throughout his life, he had only books and paintings for company, never contemplating marriage or having children, but during one unintended sketching trip, he had met Ancestor of Wind and fallen in love. It was his first love and also his last. You want the world, Pearl? Hua Wuqing looked at Su Zimei and said, yes. Su Zimei nodded. Hua Wuqing was silent for a while, and then with a few slight waves of his hands in the air in front of him began to fluctuate. Holding the divine brush in his hand, he swept it through the air, tearing the space, and a spherical pearl flew out from the rift. This sphere was pure white, its structure highly clear, giving one the impression that it encompassed everything in the world at a glance. Auspicious deer galloped, wild horses neighed, 100 flowers bloomed, and a long river flowed. Hua Wuqing retracted the Ancestor of Wind's painting and then handed the world pearl to Su Zimei with a light laugh. I hope it will shine brightly in your hands. It will, Su Zimei said with a smile, nodding. After obtaining the world pearl, Su Zimei was about to leave when the space next to him suddenly began to fluctuate. A young man in a white robe stepped out. It seems the second heir has arrived, Hua Wuqing said with a smile. The young man in white first surveyed his surroundings, and when he saw Su Zimei, his expression froze, clearly not expecting someone to be earlier than himself. However, seeing Hua Wuqing, the youth's demeanor became excited, and he hurriedly stepped forward to bow and said, Song Qianqiu, the 17th generation disciple of the Song family, pays respects to the ancestor. Enough, stand up, I don't care for these formalities, Hua Wuqing said with a smile. Shaking his head, Su Zimei glanced at the young man. Knowing that Hua Wuqing's real surname was not Hua, and whether his surname was Song, he did not know in his previous life either. But the youth's face seemed familiar to him, as if he had seen it somewhere in his previous life. Suddenly, a flash of realization struck Su Zimei as he saw the familiar face of the youth. Isn't this guy the later painting Saint Hua Qianqiu? In his past life, many people said that it was only after receiving the legacy of Hua Wuqing that Hua Qianqiu changed his surname to Hua. Now it seemed they must be from the same family. How is the Song family doing? Hua Wuqing glanced at the youth, asking with a touch of sentiment. In truth, for Hua Wuqing, the current Song family was no longer that important after all this time. His parents and friends most likely had reached the end of their lives, and the present-day Song family, besides sharing a blood relation with him, basically had no one he knew. Nevertheless, it was his family, and he naturally did not wish to see it decline. Ancestor, you left behind many legacies and cultivation techniques in our family. Although our Song family has never surpassed your achievements, we have developed rapidly over the years and are now among the top families within Purple Sun City. Song Qianqiu replied hurriedly. The reason I was able to pass the first 3 trials so quickly is that I came across some items you left behind by chance, which contain some information about the painting palace. Even though you are my clansman, if you want to inherit the divine brush, you must still pass the 4th trial, Hua Wuqing said. I've been with this divine brush for many years. I must find it a suitable heir. I understand, Song Qianqiu replied earnestly. Paint a picture with a mood and consider the fourth trial passed. Hua Wuqing nodded, saying so. Song Qianqiu approached the long table and took out a brush from his storage ring. It was apparent that he was well prepared, or perhaps he was also a lover of painting. Upon spreading the white paper, his brush danced swiftly across it. Song Qianqiu was extremely quick, and what was more terrifying was that he painted with his eyes completely closed. After some time, when the painting was completed, Song Qianqiu gently chopped down on the towering waves on both sides of the pebble walkway with his hands as if they were knives. A spray of seawater splashed onto the white paper, giving the originally ordinary painting a few more hints of mood. The ink in the painting seemed somewhat diluted. Then, with the flow of the seawater, it appeared all the more natural, without the constraints and deliberate effort usually present in a painting. The scene depicted in this painting was the summit of a mountain, with a pine or cypress tree growing solitarily on the edge of a cliff, without using any flashy techniques to embellish it. This simple painting still managed to convey the cliff's steepness, the tree's loftiness, and the tenacious spirit of life. Chapter 106. At your age, to possess such painting skills is enough to show your love and dedication to the art, Hua Wuqing said with a gratified smile. I dare not claim excellence. I still fall far short of my ancestors, Song Qianqiu hastily replied. Take this divine brush, remember to treat it well. It has already developed its own intelligence. If you're not the haven it seeks, it will leave you on its own, Hua Wuqing advised. Song Qianqiu nodded solemnly, then took the divine brush from Hua Wuqing's hand. He examined the divine brush before him. It actually didn't look particularly remarkable. Almost like any ordinary wolf hair brush, tight clusters of small characters were inscribed on the brush handle. A single wolf hair brush to paint all creation under heaven. A lifetime splatter of ink to knock on the great Tao and the human heart. Song Qianqiu also knew this wasn't a good place to accept the inheritance, to avoid disturbance. After all, now that he had acquired the divine brush, it wouldn't hurt to find a safe place to receive the legacy. All right, you two should leave now. The inheritance of the painting palace is no more. Its reason for existence has entirely vanished, Hua Wuqing said, waving his hand as tumultuous waves appeared before him, and he spoke out loud. Ancestor, may I ask where your true body is now? Song Qianqiu hurriedly spoke. The members of our family always think of you, and my visit to the painting palace was also on a mission to find you. So many years have passed, and the Song family remains the same Song family. Yet it's no longer the Song family of old. Things have changed, and my return would no longer mean anything. Hua Wuqing shook his head and said, Go now. If there's destiny, we'll meet again. If not, do not force it. As Hua Wuqing's words concluded, the towering waves on either side boiled over, forming giant breakers that instantly engulfed Hua Wuqing in the ocean. Song Qianqiu could only sigh helplessly as he witnessed everything before him. He then looked at Su Zimei and said, This brother, as both beneficiaries of this event, how about we keep each other's secrets? It would be to our advantage. No problem, Su Zimei said, nodding with a smile. Then, the space before them distorted, and Su Zimei only felt a powerful force surge from the space, forcibly ejecting him. He looked around to find not just himself, but it seemed everyone who had entered the painting palace had been forcibly expelled. What's going on? The crowd immediately started chattering. I had clearly broken through the first trial. Why was I sent out? It drives me mad. I had already passed 2 trials and was about to solve the third. Just one step away and I failed. Since all of us have been sent out, it means that someone has already obtained the inheritance of the painting palace. Some disciples familiar with inheritances speculated as well. How is that possible? We've only been inside for a brief time. Even if someone is faster, they shouldn't be that far ahead. Listening to the discussions of the surrounding crowd, Su Zimei shook his head with a smile. He had been able to enter so quickly because he knew the rules inside entirely, and Song Qianqiu had found clues and items once left by Hua Wuqing, naturally moving much faster than anyone else. I wonder which brother has obtained the inheritance. Would you care to come out and meet us? A youth asked loudly, walking on air and standing high in the sky, but except for the buzz of conversation, no one stepped forward from the crowd after all. Everyone understood the importance of steady progress, especially with the 3 imperial rule immortal sects nearby. If they had any ideas, no one would dare to interrupt. Disciples of the 3 imperial rule immortal sects had been called by their elders for inquiries as soon as they had come out, and only after hearing that no one seized the inheritance did they shake their heads in disappointment afterwards. The elders of the 3 great emperor-level immortal sects also stood in front of the many youths and delivered a speech, the gist of which was that anyone who obtained the inheritance of Hua Wuqing could directly join the imperial rule immortal sect after all. The inheritance of Hua Wuqing involved not only the divine brush but also the world pearl, ranked first on the list of strange and unique treasures in the world. Although the crowd was abuzz with discussion, the person who received the inheritance did not come forward. The painting palace, which had been floating in the air, had unexpectedly transformed into a painting at this moment. The painting slowly drifted down from the sky when suddenly a flame erupted within it, and within a few breaths, before the crowd could even react, the painting had been completely burned to ashes. After that, the crowd began to disperse and leave, feeling as if this visit to the painting palace lacked something. The inheritances of the past would result in life and death struggles and create a sensation for a while. However, this visit to the painting palace left many things baffling. Since the inheritance of Hua Wuqing was not obtained, many sects began to depart. Suzume boarded the holy vessel of the sect and followed the great elder and others back to true martial holy sect. The journey was quite ordinary. Xiao Xingyu now did not even dare to speak loudly in front of Suzume, let alone be alone with him. It seemed that the matter with Zhang He had truly frightened him. Sometimes Suzume found it rather amusing. Someone like Xiao Xingyu, with his background as the grandson of the great elder, had never lacked resources. Since childhood and even possessed emperor-level talent. Unfortunately, his character was wanting, and if he did not change, he was doomed to mediocre achievements in this lifetime. Suzume even felt that someone with Xiao Xingyi's character was not equal to some of the ordinary outer sect disciples of the true martial holy sect. After the holy vessel flew at high speed through the sky for a day and a night, it finally landed within the true martial holy sect at dawn on the 2nd day. After returning to Goose Southern Peak, Suzume directly announced he was going into seclusion to integrate the World Pearl first. Suzume also specifically ordered Xiao Gizi to guard his retreat and not to disturb him for any reason back in his room. Suzume first set up the level 6 killing array given to him by Luong around him, so that he could activate the array plate immediately if anything unusual happened. Condensing true fate is an extremely important task, and nothing can go wrong in the process. The empty vein realm meant that one must open the 4th vein gate in the human body. Kuan Hai, the 3rd vein gate, Zhao Yingfeng, was located at the chest, while the 4th vein gate, Kuan Hai, was situated on the back, exactly opposite the 3rd vein gate. Suzume first released all the power of the divine vein realm hidden within the mysterious sphere inside his body. He directed it all at the 4th vein gate, and with the residual power of the 10 vein fruit, Kuan Hai was instantly opened. As Kuan Hai was opened, the spiritual energy inside Suzimai's body surged instantly. This spiritual energy could not be absorbed by his body, nor could it be expelled, and as it accumulated more and more within him, it almost formed a torrential river of spiritual energy. Suzume knew it was time to condense his true fate. He cut open his finger, and as his blood fell onto the world pearl, the ordinary bead immediately reacted, turning into a streak of light that followed Suzimai's blood through the wound and into his body. Chapter 107. When the world pearl entered Suzimai's body, it was instantly enveloped by spiritual energy. Spiritual energy slowly flowed into the world pearl, and he began the long journey of refining it. The world pearl possessed a nascent intelligence, which was initially resistant to Suzimai's refining efforts. But as Suzume refined it bit by bit, the intelligence's resistance gradually faded away. This process of refining lasted a full 7 days, during which time the world pearl experienced continuous mystical phenomena. There were deep seas inverted for 90,000 miles, then slowly ascending to transform into a clear blue sky. Massive beasts roared towards the heavens, standing billions of feet tall. Shattering the firmament with a single punch, willows stood in the wilderness. And as the willow catkins fluttered and swayed, deep brown cracks appeared on the earth. There were also hurricanes that whipped up sandstorms 10,000 feet high, cleaving the entire world in two, with the horizon engulfed in darkness and ground dimmed. After Suzume completely refined the world pearl, the bead emitted a dazzling cyan light, and the visions within it changed incessantly. All the surrounding spiritual energy poured into the world pearl, as more and more spiritual energy gathered. Above Goose Southern Peak, the air was so rich with spiritual energy that it resembled the dark clouds before a downpour, almost impossible to disperse. Countless vortices of spiritual energy storms arose at the horizon, sweeping over the entire mountain, as if to uproot it entirely, before all flowing into the courtyard where Suzume resided. Within Suzume's body, it was now a chaotic space, with the world pearl having vanished from sight, leaving behind only a clump of pure white mist. This dense mist seemed to be brewing something, as the surging spiritual energy storms from the outside world entered into Suzume's body. Suzume himself seemed like a black hole, absorbing all the spiritual energy into the white mist within him. The fermentation of this mist required a long time, and as more and more spiritual energy was absorbed, the vicinity of Goose Southern Peak nearly formed a vacuum zone. The flow of spiritual energy also became scarce, and the absorption by the mist was somewhat outstripped by demand in the skies above Goose Southern Peak. When the spiritual energy had gathered into storms, it had already caught the attention of many people. However, Su Qingshan intervened, directly obscuring that patch of space, stopping those who sought to investigate from advancing further. At this moment, Su Qingshan walked on air, observing the increasingly scarce spiritual energy around Goose Southern Peak, his brows slightly furrowed. "What is this kid doing? How did he stir up such a commotion?" muttered Su Qingshan immediately after. He waved his hands, and a beam of white light shot towards the sky. The disciples of the true martial holy sect could then hear a rumbling sound, as if something had been activated simultaneously, for different lights emanated around the sect gate, and as these lights soared into the sky and intertwined, converging together, it seemed as though a massive wheel was being turned slowly, and a gigantic array seal appeared on the ground beneath the true martial holy sect. This array seal featured a Taiji pattern, with the black and white fish rotating slowly. As the array seal manifested, the spiritual energy within 100 miles around the true martial holy sect seemed to be drawn in, all absorbed by the great formation. At that time, everyone in the true martial holy sect looked up at this magnificent sight. Spiritual energy from hundreds of miles around congregated into a storm, scouring the earth and destroying everything in its path. The sect protection array of the sect gate has been activated. Does this mean a powerful enemy is invading? A well-informed disciple murmured to himself, watching the scene unfold. This sect protection array was set up by the true martial great emperor himself, and later, it was enhanced by 3 other great emperors, making its might tremendous. Every activation of the great formation requires a massive amount of spiritual energy. Just as a storm of spiritual energy was about to flow into the core of the formation, Su Qingshan stood at the forefront of the spiritual energy, his presence as imposing as a rainbow, with strands of his slightly black hair swaying in the wind, with a wave of his right hand toward the sky. The space around him immediately collapsed, and countless fissures spread amidst the chaotic flows, permeating the surroundings. The entire sky seemed to turn into a spider's web, with endless currents of air being split to either side. The oncoming hurricane of spiritual energy, which was originally roaring towards the formation's core, was forcibly diverted, all of it rushing towards the courtyard where Suzume was located. By now, Suzume could feel the depletion of spiritual energy, but he was still in the midst of nurturing his world, unable to do anything about it. He had anticipated that condensing true fate would consume a vast amount of spiritual energy, especially since he was also trying to form a pseudo-world, but he didn't expect the required amount of spiritual energy to be so excessively high. Due to the lack of spiritual energy, the speed at which the white mist in his body was brewing and transforming also slowed down. He wasn't worried, though. Even though it had slowed down, the process of condensing true fate would take a bit longer. But there was no danger, however, at this moment. He suddenly felt an unimaginably rich surge of spiritual energy flooding into his body. This spiritual energy was exceedingly plentiful. Even though he had absorbed it with all his might, the spiritual energy continued to flow unceasingly. With this inflow of spiritual energy, the pace at which the white mist within Suzume was brewing and transforming accelerated even more. Outside the true martial holy sect, the Grand Formation was continuously absorbing the spiritual energy from the surrounding bailey, then incessantly channeling it into the courtyard where Suzume was located. The spiritual energy roared, growing ever more formidable, while the sky, swept by the wind that carried away remnants of clouds, seemed blanketed in a white expanse, blocking all sight. Even with the support of this vast amount of spiritual energy, Suzume took a full half-month. One day, a muffled sound suddenly emanated from within his body, accompanied by a faint tremble, as if the sound of the great Tao itself had descended, signaling the birth of something. The white fog inside him gradually dissipated, and a brand new world completely took shape within him. Heaven and earth began to separate, with the heaven representing the pure rising slowly into the high sky, looking down upon the entire world. Earth, representing the murky, also gently descended, bearing the weight and suffering of the world. Heaven pure, earth turbid. As heaven rose by a foot, earth dropped by a foot. For every 100 zhang heaven ascended, earth descended by the same. Heaven and earth underwent an unknown amount of rising and falling until they finally came to a halt, and a vast world formed just like that. But, regrettably, this world had neither sun nor moon, and the heaven that stood for purity was now muddled. The pitch-black sky, like a spider's web, was filled with countless black holes from which massive meteorites, carrying an irresistible force, fell from the heavens. These meteorites, like a meteor shower, fell from the sky, seemingly determined to obliterate the entire world. Meanwhile, on the ground, countless fissures emerged, with tsunamis sweeping up giant waves that shattered many pieces of land. Volcanoes erupted across the earth, torrents raged, and combined with the descending meteorite swarm, crustal movements wreaked havoc, leaving the world full of scars. Divine might thunderbolts fell from the sky, each carrying supreme might and shattering even more land upon impact. At this moment, the world resembled nothing less than purgatory on earth. Chapter 108. The world at this time resembled a prehistoric world, devoid of life and utterly unsuitable for the existence of any species. Suzume slowly exhaled a breath, knowing that this was the limit to which the world pearl could transform. The transformation of the pseudo-world was incomplete, and his ability to wield the power of the world was limited. Even so, with just this pseudo-world, he had already gained a significant advantage over many others at the starting line. When the true fate, emergence in the Emperor Pulse realm eventually happened and battle ensued, just by summoning the pseudo-world, he could imagine the look of despair on his opponents' faces. At this moment, his fourth vein gate was thoroughly breached, and under the push of divine vein realm energy, his realm was continuously ascending. Empty vein first layer, empty vein second layer, empty vein ninth layer. His realm climbed until it reached the pinnacle of the empty vein realm and then stopped, and Suzume took a deep breath. He thought this transformation was about to end and was preparing to get up when something in his body suddenly quivered. His heart suddenly began to beat rapidly. Suzume's mind blanked out and his whole body stiffened in place. Inside his body, the mysterious spherical artifact that had been motionless all this time started to spin. This mysterious sphere was the greatest secret of Suzume's reincarnation, but Suzume only knew that besides storing cultivation, it made tearing through space much easier. He had no idea about its other functions, and since his reincarnation, the sphere had never shown any activity until now as it began to rotate for the first time. Suzume felt that his body was beyond his control as the mysterious sphere flew into the true fate world he had just condensed. He felt as if his consciousness had left his physical body, carried by the mysterious sphere into an unknown world. When Suzume's consciousness became clear again, he found himself in complete darkness. At one end of this darkness, there was a grand and tumultuous river flowing slowly. The water shimmered, pulsating inexplicably, and though the river seemed to flow gently, Suzume felt as though each ripple had the power to change the world. It was because his cultivation technique, the soul Great freedom Jew focused on the past, present, and future. Thus, when he saw this river, a sense of familiarity washed over him. River of Time, Su Zimai's voice quivered as he murmured to himself, the River of Time, also known as the River of Fate, is one of the cores of a world. From the moment everyone is born, their lives, destinies, and all their experiences are branded and recorded in the River of Fate. Legend has it that only by unlocking all 12 vein gates and evolving beyond oneself can one step out of the River of Fate and truly take control of one's destiny. In fact, not only humans but everything from a blade of grass to the origin of a world is recorded in the River of Fate. All things under heaven cannot escape the bonds of destiny. Su Zimei looked at the river before him, his body trembling slightly as what he once yearned for in his dreams was now right before his eyes, yet now he was here merely as a wisp of consciousness, and not at all under his own control. The mysterious sphere carried Su Zimai's consciousness against the current of the River of Time, moving towards the very end of time itself. During this journey, Su Zimai's view was enshrouded by a white mist, making it nearly impossible for him to see the outside, and his consciousness began to grow muddled. Su Zimei fell into a deep sleep. He didn't know how much time had passed. Said it could have been an instant, or it could have been eons. When the mysterious sphere finally stopped, he slowly awakened. The scene that unfolded before his eyes completely shocked his spirit. He found himself beneath the starry sky, where countless stars twinkled with bright radiance, illuminating the heavens. A galaxy stretched across from the 9 heavens, enveloping the entire starry sky. Within that galaxy, innumerable nebulae flowed like thick liquid, endlessly streaming on for miles. At one end of the starry sky, the River of Time surged ceaselessly, with the history of the past unfolding before Su Zimai's eyes like a movie. From the day the River of Time came into existence, from the moment this world began, all of history's records were now being observed by Su Zimei as they evolved within the River of Time. Great trends of the world ebb and flow. What has been long divided must come together, and what has been long united must break apart. Just as with these myriad worlds, there comes a day when they move from birth to destruction. All things in the world are relative. On a small scale, a life moves from birth to death, and at the same time, a new life is born. This is the propagation of a species. Death and life are inherently relative. On a larger scale, a world moves from its beginning to destruction, only to have a new world carved out again. This is the cycle of all things in the cosmos. Simply put, whether small like humanity or large like a world, everything has a day when it moves from birth to destruction. A world moves from birth to destruction, and then within that destruction forges a new world anew. Thereafter, this reborn world once again moves toward destruction, and then again, within that destruction, a new world is carved out. In this endless cycle, the history of a world unfolds. Not a single world has truly remained from the beginning of the universe until now. They all go through cycles of birth and destruction. We call each reborn world an epic. From the destruction of the last epic to the beginning of this new reborn epic, the River of Fate also took shape at that moment, recording the destinies of all things in the world. Each epic has its own River of Fate, and when an epic is destroyed, its River of Fate is destroyed along with it. Therefore, the River of Fate before Su Zimai's eyes contains everything that started from the beginning of this reborn epic. This reborn epic's certain place, we call it Yuan's central continent. The wheels of history roll onward slowly, and Yuan's central continent opens its first chapter. We call this the mythical era for the people of Yuan's central continent. Now, the mythical era is too distant. Aside from exploring ancient ruins, humanity can no longer find any traces of that era. If it were not for the existence of these ancient ruins from the mythical era, many would even doubt whether it ever existed. Following the mythical era, Yuan's central continent turned the page to its second chapter. We call this the Wild Desolation era. After that, a man named True Marshall stood at the pinnacle of the firmament bearing destiny. He opened the third chapter for Yuan's central continent, the era of emperors. Starting with the mythical era, those secrets long forgotten in time began to unravel one by one before Su Zimai's eyes as they evolved within the River of Time. It wasn't just Yuan's central continent. Yuan's central continent was merely a part of this epic about the world outside Yuan's central continent. All origins and secrets also unfolded before Su Zimei, revealing an entirely majestic new world. Chapter 109. At this moment, in the eyes of Su Zimei, it was as if there were no more secrets in the world, because since the beginning of the epic, those major events recorded in the River of Fate were now evolving before him. Those details that only existed in legends of the mythical era, from their initial sprouting to their peak and then their decline, all these events were unfolding before him. With the decline of the mythical era came the age of wild desolation, which was the most humble era for the human race. Monster beasts that fed on raw flesh and blood dominated that era, a time when destiny was not yet a concept and all beings were but insignificant grasshoppers on the long journey of the martial path. As these major events evolved so vividly before him, Suzume felt as if he were in the midst of the wild desolation, transforming from a spectator to a participant. As the wild desolation waned, the first of the human race, true martial, took up destiny and unfurled the grand epic of the human race's prosperity. Each generation's great emperor, each epic-defining event included the likes of true martial great emperor, Empress Hongtian, divine sun emperor, slaughter great emperor, and so forth. The past experiences of all these great emperors were now unfolding before Suzume, with no secrets hidden, from the initial formation of destiny in the era of emperors to the meaning of the 100 great battle bodies at the beginning of the epic. All these ancient enigmas were now visible to Suzume. He also learned the name of the mysterious sphere that had brought him to the River of Fate, Chaos Pearl. At the beginning of the epic, it was one of the most important things in constructing this era, but by some twist of fate, it had been refined by him. As all the secrets of the eternal ages had been revealed through the evolution of the River of Fate to Suzume, the Chaos Pearl began to buzz. An immense force spread from the Chaos Pearl, causing the entire starry sky to roar and the Milky Way to tremble. The nearby River of Fate also boiled restlessly, as if its pale white waters were traversing endless time and space. Each of its flows signified a change in the destiny of many lives. Then the entire Chaos Pearl rose into the sky, and a gray light beamed forth, illuminating a small segment of the River of Fate. The segment of the River of Fate illuminated by the gray light seemed to freeze, halting in its course. Next, the Chaos Pearl soared skyward, and astonishingly, that small segment of the River of Fate was abruptly severed and taken away with the Chaos Pearl. Suzume felt his consciousness blurring again. The Chaos Pearl was taking him to an unknown destination. Much later, when Suzume awoke, he realized his consciousness had returned to his body, and he was now in the courtyard of Goose Southern Peak, and inside him, the true fate world that had just condensed was experiencing earth-shattering changes. The Chaos Pearl had brought a small segment of the River of Fate into his true fate world. The River of Fate surged on ceaselessly, and although it was only a part of the larger river, it had now become an independent existence. Having separated from the River of Fate itself, however, this small segment of the River of Fate was still too weak. It needed to attach itself to a world. It bestowed time and destiny upon a world, and the world, in turn, would feed back the energy needed for its growth. After entering Suzume's world, the river's flow became even swifter, as if expressing an inner joy. Suzume actually sensed the emotions of the River of Fate. It was pleading with him to let it merge with his world and become the River of Fate for this realm. At this moment, Suzume felt like the dominator of this world. His every action and thought were like those of a creator god, capable of changing the entire world. With the consent of Suzume's thoughts, the world he had created seemed to receive instruction, becoming less resistant to the River of Fate. Subsequently, ripples began to emanate around the River of Fate as it entered the core of this world and became one with it. With the integration of the River of Fate, Suzume's world now possessed destiny and time. From then on, all things would be unable to escape the shackles of the River of Fate. In the sky, which had been nearly shattered, a sun and a moon surprisingly appeared. The sun was located in the far east, and the moon in the far west. Both moved westward at the same pace and speed. When the sun was in the far east, the moon would be in the far west. When the sun reached the far west, the moon would then be in the far east. From then on, this world had night and day. The concept of time and the destinies of all living things had a place to belong. After the fusion of the River of Fate, the Chaos Pearl situated at the very top also emitted a desire to fuse. Suzume knew the potential of his own world was limited, fundamentally due to the limited capacity of the World Pearl. It wasn't enough to support the opening of a world. At best, it was a pseudo-world, but now with the Chaos Pearl, Suzume saw hope for advancing his pseudo-world into a real one. Suzume wasn't sure if it would be successful, but as long as there was a chance, he wanted to try. With Suzume's consent, the entire Chaos Pearl emitted a gray light. This light enveloped the whole world, the sky, the earth, the Ocean all were covered by the gray luminance. Then, the sky, originally webbed like a spider's net with innumerable cracks, began to heal, and its color became an even deeper blue. The thunderbolts that seemed to come from the divine might of the heavenly god disappeared, the roaring ocean gradually calmed down, and the tectonic plates began to move, with the previously fragmented lands fusing back together, the volcanoes on the land. Like purgatory returned to slumber. At that moment, the world suddenly became quiet, and afterward the chaos pearl entered the world's deepest recesses and disappeared from sight. The azure sky was dotted with a few white clouds drifting by, and the sun showered its light upon the earth. The earth was weighty. The ocean occasionally threw up a few sprays of waves, and the sunlit surface of the water glittered with light. At that moment, Suzume felt his power within increase by tens of times. Although he was still in the empty vein realm, his strength underwent a qualitative transformation. The power of the true fate world ceaselessly nourished his body, and Suzume took a deep breath and stood up. The ease of the Chaos Pearl's fusion exceeded his expectations, and after the fusion, this world was no longer a pseudo-world. It now had the potential to grow into a real world. Although it was just potential for now, the current true fate world still couldn't support life because it lacked the two most important elements, the yin and yang qi and the mysterious yellow qi. Only by gathering and integrating these two elements into the world would Suzume's true fate world truly become a real world. Chapter 110. This time, the meditation retreat took just over a month, a little longer than Suzume had anticipated. Due in part to the unexpected changes in the Chaos Pearl, the enhancement this time was almost a qualitative leap in strength, and Suzume could feel the power brimming throughout his body. Most importantly, having entered the empty vein realm, he now possessed the ability to tread through the air. When Suzume stepped out of his room, he felt as though the outside world had been cleansed, becoming exceptionally clear and pristine. The various spiritual medicines on both sides of the Goose Southern Peak courtyard seemed more vibrant than ever, as if they had been blessed. This reminded Suzume of the surge of spiritual energy that coincided with condensing his true fate. Senior brother, Shaogizi hurriedly approached to greet him. Has anything happened during my retreat? Suzume nodded and inquired. The deputy sect master visited before. He said to look for him once you've emerged from seclusion, Shaogizi replied. And I've heard from the disciples at the sect gate that our true martial holy sect protection array was activated recently. The sect protection array? Suzume's brow furrowed. He already had an answer in mind. It seemed that the disturbance from his breakthrough had caught his father's attention due to the scarcity of spiritual energy around Goose Southern Peak at the time. His father had had no choice but to harness the sect protection array to gather a vast amount of spiritual energy for him. No wonder the spiritual medicines in his courtyard were flourishing. It was all thanks to the bath of spiritual energy. I understand, Suzume nodded. Oh, and senior brother Lin also visited several times, but since you were in seclusion, he had to leave, Shaogizi added. Ruhu. Suzume nodded knowingly. He was sure that Ruhu had probably figured it out as well. After leaving Goose Southern Peak, Suzume went straight to his father's Azure Mountain Peak. Su Qingshan always seemed to wear the same blue robe. But compared to the last time Suzume had seen his father, there was a new sharpness to his demeanor. Father, Suzume greeted, seeing you have not neglected your cultivation, I must say, I'm truly relieved, Su Qingshan said with a smile. I will make every effort. It was you who activated the sect protection array, wasn't it? Suzume asked. Su Qingshan nodded and replied, I don't know what great fortune you stumbled upon, nor do I want to probe into it. After all, you've grown up and have secrets of your own. Just remember, your father will always be your staunchest support. You can come to me with anything. I know, I've always known, Suzume nodded vigorously. He didn't consider himself particularly sentimental, but humans are strange creatures sometimes. It's not the grand earth-shattering deeds that move you to tears, sometimes. It's the seemingly insignificant acts of care that reveal someone's true feelings for you. Suzume felt a sting at the bridge of his nose, recalling how in his previous life had believed his father didn't care about him. Had always felt that the sect gate was more important to his father than he was, but it was only after he was cast into secluded Dragon Gorge and his father mobilized the entire sect to avenge him that he truly understood. Some people loudly proclaim their willingness to go through fire and water for you. But how many can actually do it? While others simply support you in silence, which surpasses any words. It's a conviction. I say, when you father and son are together, can't you talk about something else? It's all about cultivation all day long, Warren Yun said discontentedly from the side. Talk about what? At his age, the most important thing is cultivation, Su Qingshan replied. Amo Air, you're also 15 this year, aren't you? Have you met a girl you fancy? Your mom is still waiting to hold your child for you. Warren Yun glared at Su Qingshan and asked Su Zime, Mom, how old am I this year? What's the hurry? Su Zime quickly shook his head. Just look at the grandson of the fourth elder. He has more than a dozen maidservants, and look at you, those 2 maidservants I sent you, Chun Xiao and Xia Qiu, you haven't even touched them, Warren Yun said discontentedly. Women sometimes become a bit long-winded when they speak. Warren Yun probably also hardly saw Su Zime, so she started to chatter on and on. As for your dad, there's nothing in this life more important to him than the martial path. He's wholeheartedly trying to step into the divine vein realm. Later, when the sect master left, he even took on the heavy responsibility of acting as the sect master. Now you're exactly like your dad when he was young. With eyes only for cultivation, I've never been much interested in cultivation in my life. I just hope you and your dad can be safe. When you have a family and children in the future, I can still look after them for you. Otherwise, if I wait a few hundred more years and reach the end of my lifespan, there won't be a chance for me to take care of them then. What nonsense are you talking in front of the child? With me here, no matter the cost, I won't let you leave me, Su Qingshan said hurriedly and anxiously. Then you have time to look at me more often. Your mind is filled with nothing but cultivation and the sect. Warren Yun started to feel aggrieved upon hearing Su Qingshan's words. Su Zime, seeing the deep love between his parents, realized they had entered the stage of flaunting their affection and quickly brought up an excuse to leave. You two, if there's nothing else, they'll take my leave. First, if you have a girl you fancy, remember to tell your mom. It'll help you propose, Warren Yun quickly said. Hearing his mother's words, Su Zime's pace quickened. The sect will soon open the Blood Demon's secret realm, and I've secured a spot for you. Get ready. Su Qingshan's voice followed from behind. Su Zime paused. The Blood Demon's secret realm. The Blood Demon's secret realm was a special secret realm within the true martial holy sect, inhabited by a very strange kind of creature, Blood Demon. Although Su Zime had never been to the Blood Demon's secret realm before, he had heard quite a bit about it. The realm was dangerous, but it also came with opportunities. It was said that by killing a blood demon inside, one could obtain a blood demon crystal. The blood demon crystal was a treasure that could strengthen the vitality of the human body. The strength of one's vitality affected not only one's attacking power but also endurance in a battle between 2 martial artists of the same realm. The strength of their vitality, to a certain extent, was also a factor in deciding the outcome. Thinking of the Blood Demon's secret realm, Su Zime smiled. In the previous evolution of the River of Fate, he had seen some different things. He had originally planned to go to the Pure Moon Divine Realm, but before that, Su Zime felt that the thing in the Blood Demon's secret realm might come in handy. After leaving Azure Mountain Peak, Su Zime had barely returned to Goose Southern Peak when he ran into Linruhu.